Alrighty, welcome back everybody to the second week of our new program for this month of January, heading into the month of February as well, that being the algorithmic programming with the coding language of Python. This is our second week. Last week we did a whole introduction talking about what the course is, talking about this whole idea of computer science and the computer programming language of Python and the amazing stuff we can do. We had a bunch of fun. We talked about the capabilities. We saw some projects we made in the past as well. And last week was more as sort of like an introduction. We got to know each other, got to experiment with the language of Python as well. And starting this week, we're going to get started off by working on some easier problems, easy difficulty problems, sort of getting our feet wet, making sure that we got no more webs inside of our heads as we start advancing to harder problems. And today is going to be the first official time we're going to be doing some whiteboarding, talking about a problem, and seeing how the whole programming method plays out. So thank you for joining us as always. If you have a question, you want to talk, feel free to unmute or drop a question in the chat or Q&A. And without any further ado, let's get to it. Guys, in case you don't already know me, my name is Rayon Siddiqui. I'm a senior at James B. Conant High School, just like Labdi. A little catchphrase right there is learn, play, code, sleep, and repeat. That's a good motto to apply for life. And hopefully you'll start to sort of fit into those pants as we go along in this course as well.
Hey guys, my name's Labdi, and I'm again from Conant, just like Rayan, and I love algorithms, art, and coding.
All right, guys. So last week we introduced that we're going to start off every day with an agenda, get things straightened out. And the first thing is going to be our agenda for today. That being that we're going to get started off with any questions if you guys have any. Talk about our first problem, sort of get our minds rolling. Draw it out, whiteboard it, explain how the whole problem works, what we know, what are we trying to solve for, and also do some reviewing. We know that it's been almost a month since we've actually typed some code out together as a class. So we're going to be doing some reviewing of terms, and as we go along in the next couple of weeks, if there's ever a term like an array or a variable, something we haven't really talked about, we're going to do a quick review, make sure we all understand what that is, and then we'll start tackling whatever the problem is.
But before we move on, we just want to make sure that everyone is on Google Classroom. I see the names in here. Most of us are. Is there anyone who didn't get a chance to sign up on Google Classroom last week? If so, here's the code. We can put it up for like about 30 seconds or a minute.
Yep. All right, I think we got everybody. So guys, if we're going along and you don't already have it, please make sure to have it. We'll be posting our weekly recaps there along with resources for code and links as well, especially starting this week. We're going to be starting Type Some Code. So links with our fresh and master copies will be available if you ever get lost, ever have a question as well. All right, so how do we get towards what this course is all about? That being solving problems with coding languages, and today we're going to be doing it with Python. And today's problem reads, find the greatest integer in an array of numbers. Hello, Aya. Please make sure, we just got started. Make sure you are in our Google Classroom.
I will put the code in the chat really quick.
Oh, hey, Drake. All right.
Okay.
All right, great. All right, so today's problem is we got to find the greatest integer, meaning a number in an array of numbers. So I'm sort of thinking of like this. We have an array. We're going to be talking about more about what that is. But an array is sort of like a container which can hold many of the same things. And an integer, well, that's like a mathematical term. That's a number, right? So we want to find the greatest number in a basket. So sort of that's sort of an analogy to think about as we're going along today, and something important that it's going to be a skill we're going to be focusing more and more on. Although we're starting with easy problems, as we get more complex, sort of simplifying the problem down, thinking about what is it actually asking me is going to be very vital as we go along. But today, that's the thing. Think of it, we got a basket full of all numbers 1 to 100, and we're looking for the largest number in that basket. So hopefully that you can visualize that and get that jotted down in your memory as well. And we can get started talking about it.
I see, I think Aya, or is that Drake, you raised a hand.
Yeah, can you post the link in the classroom? Because when I try to join the webinar from yesterday, from last week, Friday,
Uh-huh.
it just says the host is in a different meeting and just keeps on loading.
All right, let me go on towards that Google Classroom. Just so everybody's on the same page, make sure that we are using the right link. So if you go to our Tech Bytes, we go to our classwork, the link should be underneath our algorithmic programming.
Okay. Okay, I think.
Well, I think what we can do is we can sort of rename these so that everybody's aware what class is on what day.
Okay, I'm joining. So I'm gonna leave when I join from my laptop.
All right, sounds good. All right, but how about now, before we sort of, get started off by drawing out, whiteboarding, all that good stuff, and writing out code, let's make sure we understand and build that foundation and recap some of the old terms we did last year.
All right, so to start off with, we're going to talk about data structures and specifically just variable and arrays. A variable is basically something that we use in a coding language to hold data. For example, a box that holds toys. But in terms of code, it would be a variable that holds an integer. So we can say the variable x holds the integer 8, so that the value of x is 8. And then the second data type that we are going to use is an array. And array is pretty simple. It's basically just as the variable holds data, an array holds a list of those variables. So an array of integers is basically an array, a list of like 5 or 10 or 20, a number of variables that each hold a different data. And basically that's it. Arrays can hold different types of data. For example, they can hold different strings. So for example, a list of different words, a list of different integers, a list of different Booleans, all of that. And yeah, today we'll be using integers and arrays.
Exactly. And guys, like Laudi was talking about, the main thing to emphasize is that we can store many different types of things into a variable. Just like we have, I don't got a box near me, but like we have boxes, right? We keep stuff inside of boxes. Well, a variable is the computer version of a box. We store stuff inside of a variable. And today we're going to see how we can store numbers and arrays into variables as well. The next thing we're going to cover, guys, something we're going to be using today as well, is something called an if-else statement. This is something also known, as we talked about in the past, as a conditional. Now, an if-else statement is used to check if a certain condition is true, then we can run some code. So, we got an example right there. If we have a basket of apples, if all the apples are red, then we can cut them. If we think about it like in a more practical application, say you're driving a car with your family, right? If the light is red, then you apply the brakes. If the light is green, you keep on going, right? Well, why do you keep on going? Well, it's because the light was green. If the light was red, I'm pretty sure you're going to stop, right? Well, similarly, the same thing applies to code. If we have a certain thing which is met, then we can execute whatever code is inside of that statement. So if you take a look right here, we got a little example with the language of Python. We got 3 variables, A, B, and C. Each one of these is called a variable because they're holding a number. And our first statement is saying if A equals B, meaning if the value of A is the same as the value of B, then print this out to my screen. Well, will the first condition run? Anybody have a guess? Will this first statement print out?
No.
Exactly. And Chase, do you want to explain why?
Because A is not the same as B.
Exactly, guys. And the reason Chase knows that is because 10 is not the same number as 11. So now let's go on towards the second statement, which is saying this elif is like a shorthand method of saying else if. So sort of like if we're talking in English, if the first condition is true, do this. Otherwise, if the first condition is not met, then check this second condition. So this elif is like a shorthand method of saying that. Now, the second condition is saying if the value of A is equal to the value of C. Now, will this print statement print out?
Yes.
Exactly. And the reason why Chase knows that guy is because the value of A is the same as the value of C. So it's if you guys are looking for more in-depth explanations, we've spent days and weeks talking about if-else statements, variables, arrays, all that type of stuff. Those videos can be found on our Schomburg Libraries YouTube channel and the Tech Bytes playlist in our early weeks of our Python course. But the main thing we're trying to accomplish today is just do a quick review and make sure we are all on the same page. And as we're going along, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat.
All right. So the third thing that we're going to review is for loops. And for loops are usually used in arrays. And here is what they do. So suppose we have an array, array is equal to an array of integers. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we want to if we had a variable and we wanted to add a 1 to it, then we would have just said that variable plus 1 and then set it equal to that variable. But if we want to add 1 to each value of this array, we will have to use a for loop. A for loop basically repeats itself over a number of times and performs the same task. And if we look at this code snippet right over here, okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, right over here. We have list ints is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And inside this is a for I in list underscore int. So what that means is that list int is our array, and for I is a variable. I is a variable. In list ints is basically the length of the array above. And what I is, it's in the first iteration of this for loop, I will be 1. In the second iteration of the for loop, I will be 2. And in the third, I will be 3. Fourth, I will be 4, and then so on. And for each iteration, suppose I is 1 in the first iteration, we're going to, we see there's an if and else statement, also called a conditional, that Rayan just explained in the last slide. If I mod 2 equals 0. So that's another concept. It basically says if I is divisible by 2, then print something. And since 1 is not divisible by 2, it's going to go into this else part of the conditional and then print this. So it's going to say I is odd, or 1 is odd. And basically, once we are at this step of the iteration, as long as I is not this last number in the array, it's going to go back to this first line with the second number. And it's going to iterate once more, actually 4 more times, until it goes to this last number when it will stop. So basically, to sum all of this up, a for loop iterates through an array and uses numbers or just each variable in an array to do something to it.
Exactly, guys. Do something many times. Always think of something called a loop. That's the main thing. And at this moment,
Sorry.
That's all good. And guys, at this time, we've reviewed a lot of terms, so we highly expect you guys to sort of unmute. Let's have a discussion about any of these topics. All right, so looks like we are.
We do have one question. So it is basically a loop that goes through each item in an array. Exactly, yes.
100%. That's the nail on the head. Perfect.
Yeah.
Whenever you want to do something repeatedly, go over an array, loop it over, see each element. Always think about a loop. So we've talked about a lot of things. How about now we sort of jot and break down the problem even more, make sure that we understand everything that is going on. So our main objective is to find the greatest number in an array. Now, how are we going to find the greatest number? Well, just thinking about it, if we have multiple values we're probably going to have to do something with greater than or less than signs, right? Because we're checking if that number is greater than that number, or if this number is greater or less than that number. So we're probably going to have to use some comparisons that way, most likely thinking about using a conditional, aka an if-else statement. And then we're going to have to look at each number in our array, meaning we're going to be using loops to loop over our array, and then using a couple of variables in order to keep track of our numbers. So every week, guys, this is going to be a common theme you're going to see. We're going to get started off. Before we get started off whiteboarding and coding, make sure we have all the things we know written down, jotted down as a good point of memory. So now, how about we actually start doing some whiteboarding and sort of see how this plays out. I'm going to share my screen. Joe, would it be possible for you to add my iPad as a co-host as well? All right, so let's try to do with a mouse. This should be interesting. All right, so guys, in the coming weeks, we're gonna be doing a bit more neat, but today's gonna be a bit more sloppy because I'm doing it through my mouse, so sorry for that in advance. So our main thing, our objective I'm gonna write on the top is find the greatest number in an array, right? So I already know that we are going to have an array. So what is that array gonna look like? So right now what I'm gonna do is start writing out some pseudocode, like essentially fake code, which is not actually real code, but sort of like visioning it out. So I'm going to say that we have an array of numbers. I'm going to call that array as x. So in this case, x is going to be our variable because x is holding some value. In this case, it's going to hold an array. So I'm going to say x is going to hold some numbers. So we can put the number 3, we can do the number 7, we can do 11, we can do 15, 19. It could be a bunch of numbers, right? So this could have however many numbers we want, right? Now, x is a variable which is holding a list of data, aka an array. Our goal is to find the greatest number which is available in this array. Now, just looking at this from a practical sense, we know that the greatest number is obviously the number 15, right? Because 15 is greater than 11, 7, and 3, right? But how do we actually sort of do this with a computer? Well, in order to do that, we have to go through each and every single one of these numbers in order to make some comparisons and check if our number is the greatest one we are looking at. All right, and the way we're going to do that is firstly starting off by using a for loop. And a for loop is going to allow us to iterate and go through the whole array. So we're going to have a for loop. Some conditions are going to be happening. And inside this for loop, we're going to have a, how do I switch the text feature right here, a variable which is going to hold the current number. Now, this current number is supposed to tell me what number are we currently looking at in our array. And the way we do that is sort of looking at like this. So A is the index we're looking at. Remember, indexes are the positions at which our numbers are located at in an array. So the number 3 is located at the 0th index. The number 7 is located at the first index, 11 at the second index, and the number 15 is located at the 3rd index. Now, I am going to be looking at every single number and sort of looping over that number, right? So we can even print it out if we like. But our goal is to find the greatest number in this array. So does anybody have an idea? How can we sort of keep track of the greatest number in an array? Should we use another variable? So like we could have another number, another variable out here saying greatest number, right? And that could be equal to 0 initially, right? And now what I'm going to have to do is sort of do some comparisons right here. And the way I'm going to do those comparisons is say if, using a conditional right here, if the number I am currently looking at is greater than the number 0, then make that the greatest number. And we're going to do that comparison repeatedly throughout the whole array. So what I'm going to do is say if the current number, so I'm just going to say the current is going to be abbreviated as C, the current number is greater than the greatest number we already know about, then that means set the greatest number equal to the current number, because we know that the greatest number has changed. So that was, let's recap. So what I'm saying is that we're going to have a variable at the way beginning. That's going to be equal to 0. And this variable called greatest number is going to be responsible for holding the greatest number we find in an array. And the way we're going to do that is go through each and every single element in an array. And if that single element is greater than the greatest number we already know, then we make the greatest number variable that element. Now, that was a lot of times I mentioned the word greatest number. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to, you guys can personally chat us as well. This was for sure, starting off first week, we're gonna make sure that we are all in the same boat to make sure that we don't have any further confusions as we go along. There was a lot of the greatest element. Yes, there was. So the main thing is that we're using a for loop and a conditional. The purpose of the for loop is to make sure we can go through every element in our array. And the purpose of the conditional is to check, hey, if this number is greater than this number, then we know that we have found the greatest number. And I think this will become a bit more clear as we go along in the code. It's just getting a bit discombobulated with all the drawings.
So I'll just number our steps. So this was step number 1 to declare the array that we created. Step number 2 was just set the original greatest number to a really low number, or any number, 0. And then step 3 was create the for loop, in which we will iterate through the array. Step 5 was finally, or step 4, step 4 was to compare each number in the array with the greatest number. And then step 5, finally, was to set the greatest number to the number in the array if it was greater than the greatest number.
All right, so guys, that was a quick whiteboard in the coming weeks. So don't worry, we'll get that more looking nice and organized. It was a bit difficult with the mouse, but don't you worry. And now we are going to start coding it out.
All right.
Hopefully you guys already have an account with our website. I will drop it in the chat as well. And we'll get started. Make your way to the website. We'll get started coding.
Yep. And the name of the website is repl.it. Give us some sort of message or.
Are we doing the same one for the debugging?
What's up?
Hack the lib?
Are we doing are we going to do the same one as the debugging thing, or are we going to just make a new folder for it or whatever, a new file?
Yeah, so I would make a new file, sort of label, this is like put the date and Tech Bytes or Algorithmic programming, something like that, so you know. But yeah, every week's going to be different.
All right. We can wait for like a minute so that everyone is situated. Everyone has opened repl.it and created a new project in Python. In fact, I'll just run us through how to create a new project. So I'm just going to click new REPL and then language Python. Let's just say Tech Bytes 118. Today's the 18th, right? Yes, 2021. And then create REPL. And that's it. All right. Is there anyone we should wait for? Is everyone on Replit? Whoever wants to be. Okay. I believe I will start for now, and then the link for the website is in the chat. All right, so step number 1 from Rayan's whiteboard was to create the array. And we will just call the variable array and then set it equal to a list of numbers. Let's say 1, 2, 5, 7, 9, 34, 56. Actually, I'll keep the last number, 10. Okay. All right, so that's step number 1. Step number 2 was to create the greatest num integer. And we're just gonna name that greatest num as well and set it equal to 0. Chase, I believe we did create a new REPL.
Oh no, I was trying to help one of the other students. They were having trouble.
Okay. How do we get to that page? I'm not on the home page. Okay, I believe. Thank you, Chase, for answering that. Really appreciate it. All right, so back to the problem. We are on step number 3 now. We have step number 1, step number 2 done. We've created the array, set the greatest num equal to 0. Now it's time for us to open that for loop and then iterate through each integer in that array. So I'm going to say for I in range, and then len, and then the name of the array. So what this does is, oh, and then a colon at the end. What this len does is it outputs the length of the array that I input inside those parameters, or inside those parentheses. So this number is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For I in range 7. And what this for loop is going to do is it's going to iterate from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what we want to do is we're going to set current num equal to array at the ith index. And index is, again, a term that Rayan talked about on the whiteboard. Index is basically the point or where you are pointing in that array. So if I want to ask the index of 5, let's actually make this a question for everyone. If I want to ask you guys what the index of this 9 number is, what will it be? You can put it in the chat or say it out loud. All right. Anyone? Okay, just to review, this first index or first value is at the 0th index. The second value is at the first index. The third value is on the the third value is on the second index, and then so on. So 9 is the 5th value in the array, and therefore the index will be 4. Okay, so back to our code inside that for loop. We have set the value for the current num to a value from the array. Now, all we have to do is compare that value from the array with our greatest num. And we will compare using a conditional or an if-else statement that we talked about just minutes ago. And here is how it goes. If greatest num is less than current num, or you can say it the other way, current num is greater than greatest num. It's the same thing. Then what do I want to do? I want to set greatest num with the value of current num. So greatest num is equal to current num. All right, so let's take an example if the loop iterates through the first value of that array. So current num is equal to 1, and we know greatest num is equal to 0. So if greatest num is less than current num, we have to set greatest num equal to current num. So do you think this will be true in the first iteration of the loop? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Because 1 is greater than 0. And once we do finish through all of the iterations through the array, and we print out greatest num and run it, we get 34. And if we do look through the array manually, we see that 34 is the greatest number. Suppose I make this 7 into a 78, then our greatest number should be 78. And if we run it, it does work, and the greatest number is returned as 78. And yeah, that's basically the application of the pseudocode that Rayan did on the whiteboard into actual Python programming. Do we have any questions?
Like guys, we were talking about, you can sort of see our ideas on a whiteboard translating to actual code. We got the for loop right there in the top with for I in range. The for loop is running the number of times depending on how long our array is. And then we have a conditional, our if statement, making that comparison, making sure in every single round, if the number we have is greater than the number we previously found in order to find the greatest number. And guys, like in the coming weeks as well, all of our code we do will be posted on our Google Classroom. So if you ever got lost, ever had a question, you can always take a look at our fresh copy as well. Alrighty, so guys, that takes us through our first, you can say official day now, our second week of our algorithmic programming days on every Monday. Thank you guys so much for coming in. We're going to continue next week, continue to tackle some more problems, whiteboard them out, and translate them to code. Come with questions, guys, as we post this. We'll start off next class going over any questions you guys had about this week. But have a great week, guys. Remember, tomorrow we got Hack Central, and then Wednesday we got project development as well. Take care, guys. On the next one. See you guys.